I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Hope you had yourself a great week. It's the long weekend, everybody. You're probably sitting lakeside, maybe cracking a cold one, listening to some great agricultural content, or maybe you're working in the fields. That could be it too. I know some of you have started harvest, so this is like one of those weekends that it could be relaxation, or it could be we are in full swing when it comes to harvest, or at least getting ready for harvest for sure. And then the heat continues, right? The heat continues. It has been a warm spell. There's a lot of concern about where crop yields are going to be. I think maybe there's a little bit more volatility in the yield than maybe we thought there would be, say, 6 weeks ago, and the heat has brought that. Like we've been discussing over the past number of weeks, we've definitely knocked ourselves off the optimum yield curve. The question is how much, and that really depends on the area. And I know when you look out your window, you say to yourself, I don't believe there's any yield out there. Well, hey, last year we proved there's a little bit, we're not as great as predicting yield as maybe we thought, because yields were above expectations. I do think, though, there's going to be some poor spots, some below average. I've already had some farmers who are into their crop saying below average is what they're thinking. But there's others that are saying to me, you know what, I think we're going to be on the high side of our average expectations. In Montana with the wheat harvest, there's a few farmers that have told me they were feeling very negative about what they saw for the exact same reasons, because of the heat, and things have turned out better than they were thinking. So we won't know until we get into the field. So, yeah, that's how it is every year, right? The canola is the one I think where there's the biggest question mark. The heat blast on some of this canola during flower is definitely a concern. But you know what? Hey, we still going to have a crop to market, that is for sure. And we're going to hear today from Neil Townsend of Grain Fox. We're going to talk about a number of different commodities. You're going to hear that at the back end of the show. We're also going to have a beef market update with Anne Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange from East End, Saskatchewan. And we'll also be joined by Doug Gillespie. He is a former president of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association, and talking about this week's passing of Lyle Stewart. Lyle Stewart was the Minister of Agriculture in Saskatchewan. He lost his long battle with cancer this week, and really thoughts go out to Lyle's family and everybody that knew him, and just the contribution that he had to the industry. Lyle was, I have very fond memories of my interactions out on the road at different events and getting a chance to interview and interact with Minister Stewart. I always found him to be such a kind-hearted man, so friendly, and just a regular guy. And I think that's what made him magnetic for a lot of people. He's just no nonsense, straight shooter, not a loud mouth, big mouth, yappy. He just said it like it was. And I think that's really what a lot of people appreciated about him. We were going to get some thoughts here from Doug Gillespie today, as well as Anne Wasko. And what's interesting is both of their points overlap with mine and Lyle's very first appearance as the Minister of Agriculture in Saskatchewan. So I don't want to spoil that. We'll get to that here in a little bit. Hey, on the RealAg Radio podcast on Thursday, we were joined by Saskatchewan farmer Daryl Franzu. Let's hear what Daryl had to say about his crop conditions.
You know, we ended last season and we were in decent shape. We just have not got the rainfall this year. We're between like 2 and 4 inches on the whole farm. So that heat wave there a week ago or so really put a damper on the crops. I would classify them as poor, but it's a little area, and unfortunately that's where our farm is.
Yeah. It is sort of one of those kind of the weather lottery, right? Is that some people have won it this year and others absolutely not. Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say it's the thunderstorm lottery, and unfortunately it stayed every other direction but right here. So nothing you can do about it, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
unfortunately, you can't control the weather.
No, one of these days we maybe will be able to at least. I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
That might get pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to go down that route.
I don't think we do either. Now, okay, so no, but are you in an area where you would say, you plan for at least very dry conditions as the norm? Is that something that is part of that, or is this a relatively, in the last few years has been the challenge, but hasn't been the long-term trend?
No, for sure. We're not in a high rainfall area, but we do normally have decent enough moisture. We're usually fighting the growing season, not the moisture, right? So this is definitely abnormal for us.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of years here in a row that unfortunately we haven't got it. Last year we were lucky; we had timely rains. The year before, obviously, there was a drought, kind of Western Canadian wide. So it is unusual. We usually get the rain.
Yeah. Okay. And what is the crop mix? So we talked wheat and canola. What else is in the mix?
We grow soft white wheat for the ethanol plant in Lloydminster, and we grow canola for the crush plant. We used to grow a lot of pulses, ran into root rot problems, so we've kind of went away from them for the last 7-8 years. And so we're in a 2-crop rotation. Unfortunately, up here there isn't many options. It's a cereal and canola kind of deal.
That was Daryl Franzu of Glasgow, Saskatchewan on the Real Ag Radio podcast on Thursday with host Lindsay Smith. And yeah, you can hear not the highest of yield expectations, but hey, you know what? I want to hear, that's Daryl's. I know some of you are in some other spots where maybe things are looking a little bit better, or maybe they're looking a little bit worse. It would be great to hear directly from you. You can send me an email on that or any other issue we discuss here on the program, shaney@realagriculture.com, or you can find Real Agriculture, of course, across all the different social media platforms, or you can call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from Doug Gillespie. Now, Doug is the former president of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association, and he's got some thoughts and some memories related to former Ag Minister Lyle Stewart, who passed away this week after a long battle with cancer. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend here on 980 CGME and 650 CKOM.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
This segment is brought to you by FP Genetics Hybrid Fall Rye, innovative seed genetics for Canadian farmers. Contact your local FP territory manager to discuss your fall seeding strategy and discover Hybrid Fall Rye's flexible end uses for marketing, milling, distilling, ethanol, and feed. Visit hybridfallrye.ca today.
And welcome back to Real Ag on the Weekend. Well, we had the passing of former Ag Minister Lyle Stewart this week. And I think a lot of farmers and ranchers in Saskatchewan have thought about the contribution that Lyle Stewart had on the ag industry in Saskatchewan and beyond. And here joining me right now to talk about some of the contributions of former Ag Minister Stewart is Doug Gillespie. He is former president of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association. He ranches 30 miles southeast of Swift Current. Hey, Doug, great to chat with you.
Thank you. Glad to speak with you.
Yeah, so Doug, Lyle Stewart passing this week, a long battle with cancer. When you think of former Minister Stewart, what comes to mind in terms of his contribution to the agricultural industry?
I don't know. He was, I guess, the things that his sense of humor and how easy he was to talk with. The door was always open to listen to any concerns or ideas you had. He was very good that way.
Yeah, and he had a way of disarming a situation. Like I actually remember, I've talked this earlier this week on the Real Ag Radio podcast about this, that, I remember his first appearance as ag minister was actually at the Saskatchewan Stock Growers meeting in the Cypress Hills, and there was like 2 feet of snow, and it was a pretty contentious time because there was some changes to some pasture regulations, I believe, by the feds. And a lot of ranchers were angry, and they wanted answers, and Mr. Stewart was thrown into a pretty hairy situation right off the bat. Do you remember that meeting?
Oh, I remember it very, very well, because I was the one that went and picked him off the plane and took him back.
I'm sure he had some thoughts when he got back in the vehicle afterwards. He was probably like, whoa, what did I get myself into?
He sure did, and it was... He said there's some upset people there, but some very positive things come out of it. Yeah, that was a tough thing to step into. Was totally different. One other thing that he was very instrumental in setting up the insurance programs to help livestock industry deal with droughts and industry shortfalls. He played a huge role in that too. So it was his time as ag minister was some big things happened in the industry.
Yeah, and I think it's because he was so rooted in the industry that it allowed him to understand where people were coming from, right? I think because he was so close to the grassroots level, it gave him an advantage, right? And not all ag ministers have that sort of a background, but Lyle just was really connected. He just had a way of connecting with people, as you mentioned.
Well, he had a passion for the cattle industry, and he had farmed. So, I mean, it really, those were the 2 big things that he had to deal with. But he really had a passion for the cattle industry. He said, I'm not just sure how big a herd that he ran, but he always talked about really, it was a real passion for it.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, I appreciate your comments here on Lyle Stewart, and in a week where he lost his battle with cancer. Of course, we wish all of his family all the best, and our thoughts are definitely with them at this time. I'm sure it has not been an easy week for them, but we're definitely thinking of them. And Doug, before I let you go, how are those grass conditions out there southeast of Swift Current?
Well, it's the best grass year in years. I don't know. I think in my case, I'd have to go back 16 years to see grass like this. If just the grass, maybe the alfalfa and the hay crops weren't just been better ones, but as far as the grass year, I haven't seen it better since it's been years since. But it was never got a big rain. It just lots of little ones every week, and the temperature was cool. It was absolutely ideal for grass.
Probably going to see some strong prices in the fall here too, I would think, on these feeder animals.
It's a good time to be in the cattle industry. The last few droughts is tough, but this year is going to be quite a bit simpler.
Yeah, well put. Hey, Doug, thanks a lot for joining us here today on RealAg on the Weekend. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Lyle will be sorely missed, and I'm sure extend our deepest sympathies to his family, and he will be sorely missed in the industry and in all over. He was a great man.
Doug, I couldn't have put that any better myself. So, like we said, thoughts go out to the family of Lyle Stewart. In other news that happened this week, and a lot of people have been talking about this over the past number of weeks, and that's farm profitability, okay? And we talked about some of the yields in the opening of the show. We're going to get to the markets here in a second with Neil Townsend of Grain Fox. But one of the indicators of where farmer profitability health is, I think, is what's happening in the equipment market. And we are definitely seeing a slowdown. And we're seeing it in the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, their monthly reports. We're definitely down year to date, much more so in the U.S. than in Canada. The U.S. numbers are a little bit stronger to the downside than they are here in Canada. But now we're starting to see some concerning things when it comes to layoffs and slowdown in manufacturing in the ag equipment space. So we posted a story at RealAgriculture.com about the number of agricultural equipment manufacturers that are reducing the size of their workforces is growing, with planter maker Kinsey Manufacturing joining the list of companies that are publicly acknowledging layoffs. Kinsey has issued layoff notices to 193 of its 815 employees in Williamsburg, Iowa, as of August 1st. John Deere confirmed another 134 layoffs this week as at its seeding and cylinder plant in Moline, Illinois. Adding to the global workforce reduction that has seen more than 1,000 Deere staff let go over the past few months. CNH Industrial, Case in New Holland, it says they've reduced its ag production hours by 30% year over year in its second quarter earnings call on July 31st, as net ag sales had declined by 20% versus the same quarter last year. In April, the company said it would be laying off 200 workers at the Case IH facility in Racine, Wisconsin. A day earlier, AGCO said it had reduced its production hours by 23% in the second quarter. They're AGCO is the parent of Fendt, Massey Ferguson, and Precision Planting. They say that net sales for the quarter were down just over 15% versus last year. AGCO previously said it plans to move production of balers and mowers from Heston, Kansas to Mexico in 2025. So similarly to John Deere moving, I think John Deere's moving some cab manufacturing to Mexico. That not only is the cutbacks hurting or the layoffs hurting in the U.S., but also it's a little bit of a double shot of hurt in the fact that some of those jobs are moving. Actually, they're not just being cut; they're moving south of the border to Mexico. Canadian manufacturer Salford Group, owned by Linamar, is also downsizing, as Salford filed a required notice last month with authorities in Iowa that is closing its manufacturing facilities there, laying off 51 workers. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics monthly data shows the number of American jobs in the machinery manufacturing, which also includes non-agricultural manufacturing, has declined by about 10% in the past year. So, yes, things are not the best right now in the machinery industry, and a lot of that's tied to where you are as the farmer. And how fast we have turned. We've gone from where you couldn't find a piece of machinery, right? We couldn't make it fast enough. We couldn't find it. New, used. It was just like, I'll just take it. And I'll just plug my nose and take the price. But as we've seen the commodity markets pull back, lower expectations from a financial perspective, this is mainly driven out of the U.S. Things are slowing down. And the result of that is these businesses are having to adjust, right? That it's a given. It shouldn't be a big shocker to anybody that these layoffs are happening at this time. What we're really hoping for, we don't want to see this. We don't want to see some of these companies, although probably some of you get a little bit upset at times about some of the prices. We don't want to see a lack of health in the ag machinery space, because that means that farmers aren't profiting either, and then we're kind of cheering against ourselves. So let's hope that this market can recover. And and speaking of the market, let's get to some commentary on the market with Neil Townsend and Grain Fox when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School. Brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Welcome back to RealAg on the weekend. Okay, let's dig into the markets, and we're going to start off with some commentary from Neil Townsend, market analyst with Grain Fox. And I had Neil on the RealAg Radio podcast earlier this week. We talked about a number of different things. Obviously, corn, and it's the leadership of the market, and trying to get a handle on which direction it's going, and how far below $4 can the corn future for December go. But then we got to Durham. Here's what Neil had to say. One of the crops that we don't talk about a lot, but I've been hearing a lot of noise from our audience, that is Durham. And there is a thought out there, and this makes sense. Canada's a big, a big producer of durum in the world. It's an important crop, but it's grown in the more dry areas of Western Canada, and farmers are seeing their yield go back on a day-by-day basis because of how hot and dry it's been. Some say a bushel a day, some say a bushel and a half a day, whatever. It's going down. Is there some buoyancy to this durum market right now? How should we be looking at it?
Well, unfortunately, no, there isn't.
Oh, Neil, come on. Really? Oh, crap.
There was just a Tunisian tender. Canada really wasn't a participant, but the back off to Western Canada would have been at best about $7.50 a bushel, which is, way below the market here. But it's indicative of sort of one of the big changes that's happened in the durum market over the last year. Unfortunately, we've seen more participation from non-traditional exporters of the raw durum, one of them being Russia. And Russia is contemplated as maybe having done some of the business to Tunisia. But the main culprit is Turkey. And Turkey made a decision to sort of mill pasta out of regular wheat or just non-durum wheat and export their durum last year. And that had a pretty big impact on the market because Canada was on a short crop. And we just didn't get the level of sort of demand pull that we thought we'd see. And that seems to be what's going to maybe happen a little bit in 24-25 as well, with a couple changes. One is that supposedly the European Union has made a prohibitive tariff on Russian durum, so that won't access the European market, and maybe that opens the door for a little bit more incremental North American imports for Europe. Europe didn't have the greatest crops, although Spain had a bit of a bounce back. Morocco had a terrible crop. So in Western Canada, like early in the season when we sort of had more like Garden of Eden conditions in your area and southern Alberta and southwest Saskatchewan, we were contemplating maybe having a 7.5 million ton crop of durum. That's off the table now, as you say, like the weather conditions just haven't been favorable enough. Unfortunate for the individual farmers, but for the collective, I think having a little bit less durum, taking 1 million, 1.5 million off that number. So instead of a 7.5 million, maybe having like a 6 million crop, and our southern neighbors in the US suffering some of the same weather conditions. So them, instead of having a 3 or 4 million ton crop, maybe they'll have like a 2 million ton crop. That actually probably serves the market a little well. And having a little bit shorter exportable surplus probably serves Canada well. I don't think there'll be a broad-based repair in the prices until we see some indications about how crops look in the Middle East and in North Africa, sort of, Jan, Feb, March of next year. But it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. When I thought that their crop would be 7 to 7.5 million tons, I contemplated durum trading below spring wheat. But I think with the smaller crop and sort of the conditions remaining threatening, that prospect is probably diminished. I think durum will maintain some premium over spring wheat. But, spring wheat is also a market where prices probably won't be as buoyant as they were last year. So, add in a little bit to that, and you're probably looking at, it's going to be hard to get double digits for durum consistently in in 24-25,
Okay,
unfortunately.
but let's broad brush it. I've got two decisions. I'm going to take my lumps and I'm going to move my durum crop off the combine.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to go old school durum grower and pretend like I'm growing canary seed. I'm going to put it in the bin and I'm just going to hold. Like and I know there's lots of strategies in between all of that, but which one is probably and obviously everyone's got different cash flow situations. I'm just, in the purest sense, which way am I going on those two strategies?
Well, I don't want to take avoid the question, but I think a hybrid strategy of that.
Okay.
I think that there's always, when you're looking around the world, there is a lot of sort of unknowns and, the old Rumsfeldian quote, the unknown unknowns. And I mean, things can change. So I do think that there's enough durum that's going to try and get into the pipeline that probably selling right at harvest might not be the best strategy. So you might want to use your storage to kind of store it for a little while or sell prior to harvest if you need cash flow that. And I would kind of say move about, 50% of your crop and then the other 50%, but sometime before Christmas.
Yep.
And then the other 50%, I think you'd kind of, play the longer game on it. And the reason I play the longer game is things can turn pretty fast, both in terms of, political stability in some of the countries that we're talking about, but also in the weather conditions in those countries. And I think just if you look right now, like, you and I could do a whole half hour on just you throw out a country and I tell you what kind of extreme weather they're experiencing right now. Now, whether that's just because we're more informed than we were 20 years ago, or if there's in fact more weather circumstances, like my good friend Dan Bassi just sent me a Twitter feed from China. And it's just a guy who shows you all the extreme weather that's happening in China. Like China is a big place, but I was just amazed that like in the last 48 hours, there's like heat of like 48 degrees in some places, extreme floods, like rivers that have never been that high. Like, I just mean, like, is that just because I'm more informed that's always been happening? Or is it because, something is actually happening? So in the world of durum, because it's concentrated in areas that are already sort of very finite for how they're doing because they don't have high levels of water involved in it. I mean, the lack of water or extreme heat, I mean, we could see, the Spanish durum crop go really backwards next year again. We could see Morocco continue in this drought. We could see Algeria and Tunisia join them. And the one country that I'm focused on that could have some circumstances that, make it a little bit more bullish is Turkey. And again, Turkish weather conditions will start to matter as soon as we sort of flip the calendar. So I just think we're going to have to watch and wait and see because, the durum market has a lot of moving parts to it, but the overall, truth of the matter is that, we're sort of in a downtrend right now, which has started maybe, last year. But the one thing is that the Canadian crop, and we have to wait to see the final result, because the weather conditions in the durum areas still continues to be saying that it's going to be dry for sure. And also hot. So, what the final yield is going to be. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like a disaster level kind of production, but it's certainly not going to be with a 7 to start it. And, we'll see how low towards 6 we can get. And maybe it turns into a 5 million, 5+ million ton crop if these weather conditions hold. And again, poor result for individual farmers, but probably collectively for the durum industry in Canada, a positive price impact from that somehow.
Okay, Neil, I know you got to go. Final question, okay? Give me the crop that you feel has the best story relative to higher prices. Is there one where you feel like, okay, here's the crop, here's the narrative. I'm not guaranteeing it, of course. There's no guarantee in life except for death and taxes. But give me the commodity. What are you thinking?
Well, we covered canola pretty extensively, but I think the one that I'm going to say is, quality spring wheat. I think we saw great marketing conditions for spring wheat in 23-24. Canada exported a lot of it. I mean, maybe the price wasn't quite as exciting or as sexy as the farmers wanted it to be, but we looked this year at the spring wheat market, and this is what we'd say, and just the wheat market in general, that okay, the U.S. has a little bit more hard red winter wheat. They might have a slightly bigger spring wheat crop overall. They might have more exportable surplus. Will they export it? Probably not. It's very hard to get it out of there. And it's basically like it's the lowest price in the world. But people are not buying it right now. It's hard to get it out. It's hard to get it from the farmers, whatever. It's hard to get it. So Canada's in a unique position. And then we look at the European Union. I mean, the France crop is an absolute disaster, and it's terrible quality. I mean, again, it's not, nobody's comparing French wheat to CWRS. I mean, you know, that's like, I don't know if France is known for their wines or stuff like that, but I mean, it's like, you know, you don't compare that to something like a Trader Joe's, some of the quality wine. But I'm just saying, like, basically the thing is that Canada's in a unique position. Russia's going to have less, Ukraine's going to have less, Romania is not going to have maybe as much as they contemplated earlier because the weather conditions. It remains to be seen what Australia is going to produce. There is a La Nina there. So I just think Canada has this unique chance to really keep going with this 450 to 550,000 tons of wheat pushing out every year. We're coming in with a relatively tight, or almost a historically tight ending stocks for wheat in Western Canada. So I see that, you know, relative to other crops, farmers are going to get a lot of phone calls on their wheat at some point in the year. I can't really say that prices are all relative. Obviously, if corn is going to be in that $4 range, that sort of caps the upside to wheat. But if we start to get into a situation where these weather conditions persist in the European Union, like we haven't seen the rainfall streak broken in France in any big way yet. If we are wet in the fall there, I mean, that would portend that the French wheat crop is under risk again. So we start to get into a period of time where people will be watching the weather conditions for winter wheat in the Black Sea and in France and in Germany and these places.
That was Neil Townsend of Grain Fox. Encourage you to check out the Real Ag Radio podcast from Wednesday's show to hear that full discussion with Neil, or you can find it at RealAgriculture.com or on the Real Agriculture YouTube channel. Hey, when we come back, we've got Anne Wasko here for a beef market update. She's from East End, Saskatchewan, and she'll fill us in on the details of what's happened this week in the cattle market when we come back. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend on 980 CGME and 650 CKOM. Real Ag Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the Real Ag Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Let's get into the beef market update with Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Okay, let's get a bit of an update. What's happening in the cash market?
Well, starting south of the border, it looks like U.S. trade's going to be called about $2 lower than last week. So in the south, in Texas and Kansas, most of the trade right around 188. In the north, the trades come in at 196 live and 310 delivered dressed. And those are also two lower than last week. So pretty much lower across the board, kind of that quiet summer doldrums, it feels like a little bit. The cutout was really, that choice cutout really last night was pretty much steady with where it was a week ago. I think packers were hoping, expecting to get it pushed higher. They've cut back on their kills, and typically, Shaun, when kills are reduced and production's reduced a bit on a weekly basis, the cutout tends to respond by going higher. So the fact that it only held steady, I guess is one way to look at, that's maybe as much as they can push it. You know, don't forget, Shaun, this cutout is still $10 over where it was last year. So even though it feels like it's struggling, it's still, for this time of the year, a record high cutout. Taking the market back into Western Canada, pretty much steady, I think is how we can call the Alberta Saskatchewan fat cattle market. I think when the dust settles, 428 to 430 delivered dressed is going to be a lot of the trade. The weekly average last week was just shy of 257. We could be a little over 257 when collects and finishes all the data this week. So, it's still a very solid market as we head into August. The one thing I did want to just comment on and give listeners an update on was carcass weights. Here in Canada, we bottomed back in June, which is seasonally when we make our annual low for carcass weights. But last week, our steer weight in Canada was 916 pounds. That's 19 pounds over last year and 23 pounds over the 5-year average. And so these weights are starting to climb, which is seasonally normal, but they're climbing at a rate, well above last year. And don't forget last year's weights as we finished off 23 were record large. So, I don't know if we want to be putting in record large weights on top of record large weights. It's producing a lot of beef that's moving so far, but it has been a bit of a weight on the market. So that kind of, one of the other things I just kind of wanted to talk about as well was with July finished, we can kind of go back and look at, how did the slaughter numbers look like in July here in Canada? And this is a confirmation. We've been seeing this from our cattle on feed numbers have been down. Here's our harvest numbers are down. So in July, our total cattle slaughter in Canada was 6% lower than last year. When you break down by category, there's some interesting stats. So Shaun, steer slaughter in July was down 11%. Heifer slaughter in July was up 21%. Cow slaughter was down 32%. Now, again, some of that, a little bit of still impact from the Guelph Strait earlier in the month, but really telling a tale. So year to date, what's going on for 7 months in 2024? Our steer slaughter is down 6%, our heifer slaughter is up 2%, and our cow slaughter is down 14%. So telling some signs about, we knew those heifers went on feed last fall and earlier this year, and they're showing up in the data as far as slaughter numbers today. That point I made earlier about carcass weights, here's where it ties in. So slaughter numbers are down, but our carcass weights are up. So even though our Canadian cattle kill is down 5%, our total beef tonnage is only down 2%. So that's the impact of those heavier carcass weights. Wow, and you know what? Amazing. Same thing going on south of the border, Shaun. Down 4.5% in the U.S. Their tonnage is only down 1.5%.
Hey, and to finish up here, I want to get your thoughts. This week we had the passing of former Saskatchewan Agriculture Minister Lyle Stewart. I know that you had several encounters with Minister Stewart over the years. What are your thoughts?
Oh, you know what, Shaun? The first time when Lyle was appointed as a ag minister in Saskatchewan, he attended, I think one of his first meetings that he attended as the new ag minister was a stock grower AGM, and it was being held in Cypress Hills in June. And I can't remember what year this was, Shaun, so you'll have to fill it in. But I remember, well, you were emceeing, I was speaking on markets there. It was snowing outside, so we're in Cyprus in June at a stock grower meeting, and it's snowing. But Lyle, just clear as the day, was that down to earth. You could have the conversation with him. He was that would be just that kind of that common sense, easy to speak to fellow. That's how I always saw and will remember Lyle Stewart.
Some kind thoughts there from Anne Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange about former Ag Minister Lyle Stewart, who passed away this week in his battle with cancer. And you can hear the beef market update every 2 weeks on Real Agriculture. You can find it at RealAgriculture.com, or we always post all the audio on our podcast stream. You can get those podcasts wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube as well. Hey, if you have any feedback, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Hopefully everybody has themselves a great August long weekend, and thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.